I think, you put out little goals and you start achieving goals. And then, at first you're like, man, can I really become a Green Beret? It's a question, but then you become one and then you're like, all right, what's next? And you continue to challenge and push yourself.
Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Cazazzo, the author of the upcoming memoir, Training with the SEAL. Today's guest is a former Green Beret 18C. He is the founder and CEO of Olive Dreb Technologies and is the author of the book, Black People Can't Swim. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited to introduce you to Damone Brown. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Gina. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited.
I'm so excited to talk to you. So for anyone that's listening and doesn't follow the Instagram, we have a photo together because I met him in my local Barnes & Noble and I saw the book and I was like, I know this book. Like I saw this online. I know this book. I know it's a Special Forces book and I had to stop, say hello, and obviously pick up my own copy of the book. I love getting Special Forces books and I love when they're signed. And let me tell you guys something. First of all, the book is fantastic because I do like the memoirs. I'm not saying I don't, but I also like them when they inspire you and give you advice. And this book does that. Like at the end of every chapter, it has you evaluate yourself and what's going on in your life and giving you like some tips to get through some of the challenges that you might be facing. So I love that. I love how you give your perspective and talk about your life, but you also help us to improve our life. So, and it's a quick read for anybody that wants to check it out. It's really fantastic. And I want to dive into this because I'll tell you something. So we had Green Beret Kelly Keaton on the show like a couple weeks ago. And one of the things he talked about was that came up on the show, which also made me think about this book, was that there was a period of time when they lowered the standards because they wanted to let in minorities because they had this notion in their mind that Black people can't swim. And I said, where did this come from? And I then was like, I have this book. I was reading it anyway, but you talk about that in the book, and I find it really interesting. And I want to talk, first of all, I normally go to the beginning, but I want to just talk about where this notion came from and the barriers you had to go through to not let the stereotype take over your mind. Because you know how those limited beliefs or those things that people constantly tell us, then we start to believe. So how did you not allow that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there is some truth in it, right? I think, right now, when I wrote the book, it was 64% of Black youth couldn't swim. Right now, this year, only a year later, it's up to 70% of Black youth can't swim. You said stereotype, and that's the correct word. I think some people think it's a racist thing or something like that when people are having this conversation. So it has nothing to do with racism. It is a stereotype. It's not that Black people actually can't swim. I think a more fitting thought would be maybe don't swim or, don't swim often type of thing. But I really believe the problem comes from access and opportunity. So, in the book, I do talk about the history and kind of how we got there. But Blacks are capable of swimming. I'm proof of that. But, for me, I think my childhood, I was around pools. I wasn't really on the swim team and things like that, but I was just around the water and I fell in love with it. There's something majestic about the water. I think there's healing properties in it as well. But it is also a fierce force as well. But it just with my experience, I think I was a little bit different in that I at least was comfortable entering the water and having a mindset of trying to give it a shot. But other people maybe have grown up in the city and just through limited access or limited opportunity to be in the water, be in the pool, receive training, it's a lot more taxing on them mentally because you not only have to learn the skills, but you're even still trying to grow comfortable in the water. So I know people that were on swim teams. I know Division I swimmers that struggled in dive school. And so it's really not just about swimming. It really is about being comfortable and really pushing yourself past your own limits. As far as how I conquered it, it was just day by day, right? I think I don't like being told I can't do something. And I think I was lucky enough to have someone tell me that I couldn't do it. And I set out to prove them wrong. And sometimes it's ourselves that are we tell ourselves that we can't do things. And so, if I were to tell you that I didn't want to quit at some point, that would be a lie. Definitely considered quitting every single day, but you just continue to push yourselves. The difference between dive school, I think, and any other school is that you're already a bunch of Green Berets or Rangers that are attending it. And so you already have kind of a chip on your shoulder a little bit. You've been through some tough training. And so you're not going to quit generally, but the water's a different animal. So yeah, I think that answers the question a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you grew up in a military family. Your parents were in the military. So what lessons did they instill on you that helped you to not only get through special forces, but also, dive school, which is the hardest, they say is the hardest school?
Yeah, that's a great question. My parents, I think I saw them. My dad was enlisted. My mom was an officer. And so I saw them getting through. I saw them the way they lived. I saw the way they carried themselves. I didn't see that anything was different in their lives, other than I think I was aware that, seeing my mom as a black officer in the Air Force was a rarity, and being female as well. And so she climbed through the ranks, did very well in her 30-year career. And so I saw that. I saw the perseverance. I saw the dedication. I saw how they had to balance family and my interests, sports, and things like that. And I saw how they didn't, I don't think they compromised, right? They didn't compromise their faith. They didn't compromise their belief system for promotions and things like that. And so those were important lessons. Growing up, because I moved so often, I went to I moved every 3 years of my life until high school. And then when I got to high school, I went to 3 different schools. So I actually, at that point in high school, I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, but I'm definitely not joining the military. Just because, I didn't want to do that to my family. But I think after college, I really saw that I was being prepared for this life. I love to move. I love to meet new people. I loved being challenged. Putting all of that together, I think it was just a package to kind of as a primer to put me in that position. And then it gave me a roadmap, and I think a lot of people are lost in this world because they don't have a roadmap. And that's kind of the best thing that I had for myself was, here's a roadmap. Here's what it takes to achieve, this and that. And then I had people that believed in me, and then that you adopt those beliefs into yourselves, into your psyche. And I carried that with me through my training.
So what made you go Special Forces? What made you go Green Beret?
Yeah. So, I didn't plan on it, right? When I joined the Army, honestly, I didn't know what a Ranger was. I didn't know what Special Forces were, but it's crazy. I grew up, I loved Rambo. I didn't make the connections. I loved the A-Team. All of these types of movies and TV shows like Knight Rider, he was a former Green Beret, things like that. I loved those shows, and I gravitated toward those things and that type of life. But I didn't know how that would. So I think I was informed by what I watched and what I fell in love with. But when I joined the Army, my thought was I would be a chaplain assistant. I just wanted to serve. That was the point. And as I got in, I was physically fit, and I was a former collegiate athlete. And I just saw man, those guys were tough, and I wanted to see where I could measure up against those guys. And I think specifically when I first got to my unit, I was in the 18th Airborne Corps. We went on a little 12-mile road march, and I saw guys trotting and stuff like that. And I was goofing around, walking in the back, and finally I was just conversationally moving up next to people, and I'm like, man, these guys are all Rangers, and they looked at me, saw they didn't have a tab on, and so they're trying to get away, but I wouldn't let them. And just so I knew I was capable of it. But that also gave me a vision of wanting more. And so that's when I kind of started to desire to be in Special Forces or the Ranger and stuff like that.
Now, when you went that route and you went through the Q course, was there any challenges that you faced?
Absolutely. Right. I think I meet people all the time, and as I share my story, they say, hey, I tried out for Special Force, I didn't make it, and sometimes they're bitter. But then I meet people all the time, and it's like, oh, I made it, but I just decided not to go through it, and it was easy. And I hear people say Special Forces selection or the Q course is easy, and that's insane. If it were easy for anybody, that means you weren't pushing yourself. So I would tell a story. When I went to selection, there was a guy who was just an elite runner. He ran a 9:30 something 2 mile. The standard is at least maybe just under 13 minutes, I think, for the 2 mile. He got there and he had all of these PT tests that had 9:30, 9:30, 9:30. He got to selection. He was the number one runner, but he ran like an 11:30 and he beat the pack, by a huge margin. But he didn't, from right then, they're just like, hey, thanks for coming. We don't want you because, where's your 9:30? He was not giving his best, and that's what is required of you. You're required to do your best at all times, and not to save energy and things like that. But they want 100% and see what you can do with yourself, push yourself and challenge yourself.
So what made you want to go dive school?
Man, I mean, I think you put out little goals and you start achieving goals, and then at first you're like, man, can I really become a Green Beret? It's a question, but then you become one, and then you're like, all right, what's next? And you continue to challenge and push yourself. And so I was still in that realm. And again, dive school is supposed to be the hardest school, but not only the school, I really wanted to be surrounded by fantastic people, tough people. And so the dive team that I was assigned to had the best reputation in the company. And so that it was really to be a part of that team, not necessarily dive school, but obviously that's a prerequisite. And so it came from there. And you go in the team or the hallway, and outside there's photos on the walls, and you just get to see like the history of that team. And I mean, it's inspiring, and those people, and 10 years from those pictures, they're continuing to do great things. And you're just like, man, I want to be a part of that lineage. And so, yeah, I think it started from that.
So tell us a little bit about the team for those of you that don't know, those that are listening that don't know, like when you become a part of that team, what exactly do you do?
Every team is formulated with 12 people. And there's various job sets. And so there's usually 2 each minus the commander and things like that. But you do your job. So as you mentioned, I was an 18 Charlie Special Forces engineer, and you do your job, but you also train other people on your team to be able to do your job. So if I'm shot or killed in action, then the mission doesn't fail because I'm the only person that can bring demo charges or whatever I was required to do. So everyone's cross-trained. I think what I loved about being in the Army and being on a team was that, yes, we were good at direct action, but we also got to serve a lot. We got to enter different areas of the world and really see that people group grow and knowledge and skill, intelligence, and even physicality and lethality. So it was a joy to be a part of that.
You talk about in the book on like how you wanted to get in the battle, right? You wanted to be in the front. You wanted to not be on the B team, but the A team. Yeah. You wanted to be in the fight. When you got your Green Beret, that's what you were expecting, and you ended up on the B team, and it wasn't what you wanted, right? And then you got assigned something else, and you're like, I want to go to dive school. It took a lot of courage for you to even like go in and voice that. And I want to know what was going on mentally, and how did you combat to get that courage to ask for what you want?
It's a stupid thing to do. One is to ask for something else when you're just at that point in your career, you're just told to like shut up and do it, be quiet and just do what you're told. But
I want to point out you were brand new.
I was very brand new. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So I shouldn't have been asking for anything. But I was going to be the third MOS. You're generally 2 MOSs per team. I would be the third MOS of my MOS on any team. And so that gave me a little bit of bravery. And I was going to be on a mountain team that definitely didn't want to do that. And I think I got to see a guy that was a diver, and I saw how he carried himself and how meticulous he was. And I'm like, man, I like that. And I want to be a part of that. You don't receive if you don't ask. And so I was willing to just at least try. All he could say is no, and probably make me do some push-ups or something like that. But yeah, it was worth it for sure.
When he said yes, and then, you went to the next stage to say like, this is what I want to do. And then they shut the door in your face by saying, well, Black people can't swim. Talk to us about, first of all, the emotions that you must feel from that stereotype, right? And that how a stereotype could have stopped, prevented you from a goal that you wanted, like you you should still be able to go for it, right? So, and how you push that barrier to get to where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I were 6'5", right, they would have said something about me being 6'5". If I were, 4 or 5, it would have been the same thing. They would have said something about that. I think in special forces, you're 12 men in remote areas for an extended period of time. If you don't have thick skin, and you can't get past your weakness, and sometimes your people's weaknesses or differences, I guess, in this instance is, if you can't get past that, then they're not willing to get past it as well. And because they don't want it to be an issue later on. And so I think that's probably the best thing they could have said to me, and just bringing that up and giving me a chance. But that comment is really probably what kept me from quitting in the pool and not even getting to dive school. Just pre-scuba was horrible. I wanted to prove them wrong. I wanted to prove myself wrong anytime I doubted myself. And so, if for those listening, I mean, as we fall into our differences, if we allow our differences to direct our paths and our goals, then we're limiting ourselves. I think we're all the same. We all put our pants on the same way. And so it wasn't worth me quitting just because of that.
I get that. I mean, I'm 5 feet tall, and for 31 years I was under 100 pounds. You get those stereotypes, and I guess I do a keto, and we all learn the same stuff, and there are some things that a small person is very good at and that the tall people can't do, vice versa. Yeah. But the thing is, though, is that we all have to do it, right? So I think it's fantastic that you got to prove that wrong and break that stereotype. So for people that are struggling with self-imposed limits, like, what do you suggest for their first step to take to start breaking those barriers down?
Yeah. So for me, I trained, right? So my mentality in the military was that when I went to Ranger School, there's no one going to be able to break me off, because I've already done that to myself. So I took myself to the deepest, darkest places on my own, so that when I went to schools, it felt like a vacation. And so I would just say, you train, and because in that training, it's not just about physical accomplishments. It's really about mental and self-belief. But, how do you believe? I believe you start to believe in yourself through the reps. And so whether you're talking about going to grad school and doing that, it's really just pushing yourself, and the consistency of doing something hard or something that is worth it. But I think in all of life, whether in the military, out of military, if it wasn't hard, it wouldn't be worth it. And so consistency is a big key. And I would just say is to challenge yourself in different ways than anyone else could ever do before you get into the spotlight or whatever it is.
So I want to focus on, there was this thing you said in the book. First of all, as you're at dive school, I mean, it's kind of terrifying. I would find it terrifying, of like seeing people being revived around you throughout, different evolutions and stuff like that. Because the water is frightening, and a lot of things that you have to do, the breath holds and all this other stuff. And you mentioned something about, like, I forgot what you exactly were doing, but you needed to be able to shut a part off of your brain that was just that was sending, the survival mode that's trying to get you to stop, and you needed to shut that down to allow your body to keep on going. Yeah. How exactly do you do that?
Yeah, so I think your brain is really tied to your emotions, right? And so your brain at all times wants to protect you, both mentally, emotionally, and physically. And so whenever you feel some type of mental stress or emotional stress or physical stress, it's always telling you to get away from it and to run away. But it's not, at that point, it's not the time frame that you're going to die, right? But it tells you, like, hey, stop, avoid this activity, avoid this thing, get away, because you are going to die. But you have so much left in you. I think runners experience it. I think people in the water experience it. I think people that are public speaking experience it. And so you just have to know that your brain lies to you all the time, and you have to literally just turn it off. So, when I first started speaking, oftentimes I was having two conversations. One, I'm having a conversation with the audience, and the other I'm having with myself, saying, what do they think? Are they receiving this? Why is that guy sleeping? Why is he on his phone? All of those things.
Yeah, I can
And
relate
so
to
you
that.
just have to
Yeah.
shut that part of your brain off. And,
Mhm.
and again, I think it goes back to training though, right? You believe you can, and you believe you're trained for this, and your body's prepared for this, no matter what your mind says. And every time you do that, you achieve another level. So if you're at level 8, you push the wall a little bit further, then you're at level 9 and 10, and you really just see a growth. You just start to develop a growth mindset in that realm.
So, what mental techniques or practices help you to stay calm in intense situations? Because, like, we mentioned, but you just mentioned, your brain um, goes into survival mode. So, what is there like a specific technique that you do? And was there techniques that you tried that didn't work before you figured out the one that did?
Yeah, in training, it was, I'm a sprinter. And so often in special forces, you have to
Cool.
do a lot of long distance running. And so whenever I was tired, I would make myself run faster. So as soon as my brain told me, you're tired, slow down, I would punish myself by immediately running faster. And finally, my brain started to tell me, stopped telling me that I was tired, because knew it would be punished. And so that helped me in training. But I think as far as being calm, I think you have to take yourself out of the equation. You have to it's a willingness to say, especially in the water, that this is worth it. The faster that or the harder that you react, you have to understand what's happening to your body. Your stress levels going up, your heart rate's pounding, so you're going to run out of oxygen faster. So it just behooves you to kind of be calm and relaxed. But I think that you practice that before you get into the stressful situations. So daily now, I wake up, I'm part of mindfulness. I do devotions and meditations and breathing exercises, and those just pour into being resilient and being, not really affected by stress. Stress is going to come. You have to be aware that it's always going to come, but it's how you handle it is really kind of the mindset for me.
Now you talked about you just mentioned like devotion and stuff, and you talk about faith a lot throughout the book. Has there ever been a time that you really needed to lean onto your faith to push you past a point where you were like breaking mentally or physically?
Absolutely. Because if I made it about myself, then I definitely would break and quit. But it was when I
Mm-hmm.
was able to look outside myself and really rely on, spirituality, which helped me a lot, because it became not about myself, but basically I was able to draw strength from my faith, and also really see the purpose of going through all of that. The nonsense was to serve others. And so I really think that was the backbone of why I couldn't quit, is because I wanted to be in that position so that I could serve. As far as my faith, I believe that we are put in positions to serve, and so that really just drove me, and it allowed me to believe that it didn't depend on necessarily me all the time. So that means if it depended on me all the time, it means I couldn't have a bad day. So even in my bad days, I'm not. The sum of my failures is really the strength that I gained for that.
So and you mentioned this in the book, which is why I'm bringing it up. Your kids are runners,
Yeah.
and as someone who has, you mentioned your runner, your swimmer, all the stuff that you've done. What are the lessons that you impose on your kids that parents listening can also take for kids that, even if their kids aren't athletic, but they're in and, or doing a sport or pushing themselves or don't want to push themselves? What are the lessons that you instill in your kids?
Yeah, so it's really not. They do run and they compete and wrestle and things like that, but it's really not about sports. The lessons that they learn through the physical challenges will serve them the rest of their lives, whether they ever run again or not. They've gone through. So both of my son and my daughter just finished cross country season yesterday, and the end of the state championships, you look back and like, man, was it worth it? They both had PRs, and they ran fantastic, but you look back and when I stopped and said, hey, is it worth it? You, for 2.5 months, you ate clean, you did extra work, you stretched, you sacrificed, you went to bed on time, was it worth it? And they said, absolutely. And so, the thought is that was discipline. And I think people think discipline is a harshness, but it really is a skill. And when you can look at discipline as an asset rather than a punishment, it will serve you. And so it was great for them to be happy in their results. But I think, to answer your question, it starts with a vision. So I think the best thing parents can do is give their kids vision, whatever they want to do, help them develop their vision. I talked about having a roadmap earlier. If you don't have a roadmap or a vision, you can't get there, and you're just going to kind of flop around aimlessly. And so start with a vision, and then as they develop their vision, you get to have the privilege to walk alongside of them and encourage them and help them develop their vision for their life.
I love that, because I remember you talked in the book, you mentioned a vision board, and it wasn't about manifesting. Like, it was about you seeing that vision constantly so that you stick to the goal, right? You are seeing that vision, because we could lose sight of it, especially with a lot of external things that go on in our lives. We're like, oh yeah, there was a book I wanted to write. Forgot about that. Right. But when you have that vision board right there, it's like, oh, you know what? Instead of me watching an episode of TV, I see that book that I want to write. I'm going to go sit down for that hour and do some writing. And I really, again, the one thing I really liked so much about your book was those takeaways that we can do right now, and I wanted to talk about what you mentioned when you were in dive school. I think it was like floating. You really struggled with that. Can you talk about the struggle and the fear and how you pushed past that?
Yeah, floating's interesting, and again, I'm lucky that I had the experience. I was a Boy Scout, and so part of that is like survival skills in the water, and so I already knew that I couldn't float, and that was a struggle going into it. And so it's interesting to be surrounded by other people, and majority of them, floating is supposed to be like a relaxation exercise. It's a time for most people to catch their breath and to relax, and then get your mind set for the next level of as kind of the intensity jumped up. But floating for me is an absolute struggle. One of the techniques is to fill your lungs with air, and you're able to float better. And so I can fill my lungs entirely with air and go straight to the bottom of the pool and lay down on my back. Like, I am very, very, very negative buoyant. Looking toward that event, one, I have to be patient and calm. Because the instructors are very good. They can sniff out fear. They're like sharks, they can sniff out fear. And if they see that you're afraid or they see that you're panicking, they're going to exploit it. And so even though floating was such a hard exercise, I had to look as if I was comfortable. Even though you'd obviously see that I had to work more than most people to stay afloat. But the other part of it, I think I had to have the perception that it was easy. And so that served me as well, is just through my life, is to make, at least for myself, to make things that are hard look easy. That's been helpful for me, so it's not so stressful. I think as a parent, it hasn't helped me or helped my kids. In that I wake up and, I do most of the things I'm supposed to do for myself before they get up and start my day. And, I think they have grown to this point thinking that life is easy. And so that's kind of the point that I'm trying to teach them now, is like, life is not easy. There is a struggle. And I think there's a benefit in allowing your kids to see you struggle a little bit, because you don't just struggle and quit and fail. You struggle and prevail. And so I think that can serve them well. You don't want them to necessarily have to struggle so hard, but you want to, when they do struggle, you're going to, that they can get through it.
I love the whole, like, you have to look like you are, not terrified, and you have to, and that's a skill in itself. Absolutely. Because, like, the water is terrifying, and you mentioned in your book, it looks so peaceful, but it's a beast, right? I really admire the whole staying calm and controlling your emotions. Can you talk about how you learned to take control of your emotions and what advice you have for us that might be struggling to gain control of emotions.
Yeah, I think it's paramount. I learned through just I was required to do it in the military, and I think we all learn that in the special forces to control your emotions. Because you can't pass ranger school, selection, any of those things if you can't control your emotions. So we learn it through some of the stressors that we go through. But I think some people forget how to control your emotions, and so after a 20-year career, you've had to both be violent, you had to be an ambassador, you've had to serve, you had to be a teacher, all of these things. But somehow, some of the anger and violence kind of comes to the surface because we've been in it, engaged in it for so long. And so I think we have to go back to that point and those areas where we have to learn to control our emotions. So again, take yourself out of, you're not a warrior or anything like that, but the ability to control your emotion is probably the best thing that I have for myself, because I am both a kind guy that wants to serve, but I also am a warrior with a lot of combat experience. But I don't want to be the most important thing about me. I also don't want it to be the first thing that happens when I'm in a stressful situation. I'm hoping it's the calmness that kind of comes to the surface rather than always going to force and violence and things like that. I think at this point, the hope for me is always that anger and violence used to serve me well in the military. You had to do it; it's a part of your job. But I think I want to be in the point where it no longer serves us. And so I think with people trying to achieve that calmness, I think it's a day-to-day thing, and I think the biggest thing is awareness. If you can be aware of where you're at in a situation, if the situation's getting out of control, you walk away. If you feel afraid, then you just go back and get to the drawing board and kind of figure out what you can do, what reps you can do to delete that fear and so forth.
Let's talk about, well, actually, I want to talk this. You mentioned in the book there were some evolutions where your hands are tied, your feet are tied, you had to do some bobbing. And the thing is that you couldn't, like the slightest panic can rip the restraints, right, that are around you. And you talked about how that is a failure, all that stuff. Now, how do you, and you also mentioned like you just had to stay present. You couldn't think about the next thing or the next 12 minutes or the 5 minutes, you just had to be present in the moment. And how do you, A, focus to be so present, and B, also like, what if something happens where it just is out of your control? Because as I'm reading the book, you also mentioned like, well, if it's too loose, you come out of it easy. If it's too tight, it's easier for it to break. It had to be perfect. And it's just like, sometimes to have it so perfect, it just, some things are out of your control, right? Yeah. And how do you stay focused to complete the evolution? And if you don't complete the evolution, how do you not get so down on yourself to, complete it the next time? Because, I think it's like, what, 2 failures and you're out or something?
Yeah, that's it. 2 failures and you're out. So, yeah, I mean, I think you have to realize, and again, at this point in our careers, we all know that practice makes permanent, doesn't necessarily make perfect. And so you want to practice perfectly so that it can be a permanent part of you, that perfection. And then I think you have to expect those negative times where things aren't perfect, and just
Right.
expect those and go with the flow. But I think you also said it best, is staying in the moment. The pool portion of dive school is 4 hours a day. And they smoke you before you're in the pool and before every iteration. And so you're in the pool for 4 hours. And so if you're in a little 5-minute exercise and you're still thinking, man, I still have 3 hours left of this, you're never going to make it. And I think the people that don't make it aren't people that necessarily can't pass. They're just people that have made up in their mind, like, hey, this isn't worth it to me. I value breathing on the surface, and I'll take that walk, gladly take that walk. I want to make it clear, like, there's nothing special about me. There's nothing. I think when we start to think that people are special, it devalues them, right? In some sense. And so, I think that it devalues them because of the work that they put in. So if I said, hey, like, I was born special and I was born to swim and things like that, then it devalues really the hard work that I put in, and anyone else. And I think when I was in my career, I often, and I learned this from a mentor, I didn't wear a lot of my badges and stuff like that. I just had my name tape and the minimum amount of patches that I was supposed to wear, because people would see me and they would just see my awards and it's just like, oh yeah, that guy's he made it, right? He's that guy. He's good. But they didn't see the failure. They didn't see the hard work. They didn't see the determination and all of the resilience that I had to have to prevail. And so I would rather have those conversations one-on-one rather than people seeing me in my uniform and just thinking that I bought those pens or I was magically gifted in those realms.
So let's talk about when you finished. You made it through dive school, and you go to your team. Let's talk about that experience, what that was like for you.
Yeah, I mean, those guys are my brothers, so I've known them for 20 years now, and I would do anything for those guys. I've unfortunately, one of the things we try to do is lately is get together beyond funerals. We noticed in the last several years, it's like, hey, only time we come together is because someone passed, and so we've really been trying to make it a habit to get together outside of that, once a year, do a vacation together. Yeah, they're just my brothers. And so getting to my team, that's the beginning of it. I thought that, initially graduating from Special Forces, I had really achieved something, but my mentor really looked at me and gave me great advice. And he just said that this is the beginning. You have congratulations, but now the real work begins. And so and I was like, what are you talking about? Do you not know what I just went through? But he was absolutely right. You have to be a ever curious mindset. You have to continue to learn. And if you don't have that, then you're going to end up on the B team, or you're going to end up having a short career. You're going to end up getting someone killed because you weren't willing to push yourself and to challenge yourself and hold yourself to a high standard every single day of your career, rather than just enough to get the Green Beret, and then you kind of to take your foot off the gas.
What challenges did you face after you made it to your team?
I was still in a position where I was lower enlisted, and for me, I had to learn humility, right? Because I was a Division I athlete. I had a college degree, and I enlisted in the Army, and so it's easy for me to come in and think and with a chip on my shoulder and think I was special, but I had to learn humility. And those guys are some of the smartest people I've ever met, some of the toughest people I've ever met. And the best thing I could do was just to really just be quiet and learn. And soak up the lessons from the people around me. They'd been doing it for years, and it served me really well. So as far as lessons, I think you started the show talking about me wanting to get to war and battle and stuff like that. And that was a very short desire. Once I was finally in combat and having bullets flying over my head, you never want to experience that again. Although, obviously it happened throughout my career, but that was kind of a silly wish. And so that was a big lesson, is like, you don't really want that, but I had served with people. Green Berets do, I can't think of the term now, demos. So, people like old Green Berets will come back, or the people in the community will kind of come out and we'll do demonstrations and show a new piece of equipment and things like that. And I remember prior to my first deployment, this former Green Beret kind of came up and was like, oh, you guys are lucky. And, I had all this training, but we never got to, they deployed, but they never got to go to combat. And he's like, oh, you're lucky. And I kind of took that mindset with me and thinking like, oh, I can't wait. And so like, there's nothing lucky about having to go to combat. My grandfather served in the Korean War and Vietnam. And he told me he didn't like fighting. He was drafted. So he didn't like fighting and having to take lives and things like that. But he said, even though he didn't like that, he would gladly go back in a heartbeat to fight a war on a foreign soil so that the war didn't come here. And I really admire him for that. And I feel the same way. I would go back in a heartbeat as well if I had to, for the sake of others.
Was there a lesson that took you a while to get, and it was like, and then you finally I finally get it, but it took a really long time. It took a couple of smacks in the face.
I really think humility. As soon as you think you're humble, like you become prideful, in that, like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm finally humble, but then, like, man, that's a prideful thought. And so that's a lesson that even though I'm out of the Army, I'm still trying to learn. Every bit of success, you have to really, I guess, measure it or mix it with some humility. And yeah, I think that we become so that we can do for others, and we, as we grow, it's not for ourselves. It's really, to be gain a platform so that we can help and guide other people. So one of the thoughts, for me, is teacher, coach, mentor. When I look at my life and my successes, I always had a few, not a lot, but a few teachers that just loved me and encouraged me. I always had a mentor here and there that, cared for me and challenged me, and I had coaches. And so those people beyond my parents were really impactful. And so instead of having three different people, I try to be one person that does all three of those things. And that really, I think, serves me well for my mental health and just for my life's purpose. And so that's kind of how I measure my work. If I'm not if whatever I'm doing isn't able to teach, coach, and mentor someone, then I shouldn't be doing it, just for my own, in the area of my life where I'm at right now. That's really what I look for. Those three things.
And what lessons do you think helped you to run a company? You're the CEO of Olive Drab Technologies, and what did you learn from the military that allows you to be a successful CEO?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many lessons, but it's exactly that. I take the lessons that I learned in the military and I apply them to my daily life. And so it's the never quit attitude, it's humility, it's being fearless, it's being drown proof. Right? I take those things and I apply them to my life and my leadership. And you have to grow in leadership. So to think that my leadership, oh, I went to a leadership school and I'm good, I'm not. So when I came out of the military, I tried to work, for various companies, and they're like, oh, we're going to hire you. You got great leadership skills. And I would say I do, but I still struggle with how to motivate people that don't want to be motivated. My leadership that I gained in the Army was that, I was leading people that wanted to be there. And so sometimes in the civilian business world, people are there because they need a job. And so,
Yeah.
it's a struggle, and that really keeps me on my toes. That has helped shape me. And the other part is people over profit is really something that I hold dear, as I run my company. People are more important than any money that I can make. I really want people to have a better life. And I was a DoD contractor when I got out of the Army, and I saw that, hey, I'm on this contract for 5 years. And then after 5 years, the company, it's like, hey, thanks for your service. We lost the contract, the recompete. So, take good care. It was great. And then you're looking for another job. And so there was no leadership, no leadership development. When you come into a position and you leave 5 years later, you're the exact same skills, probably worse, because you've only been doing that one skill that they've hired you for. And so that's something that I want to do differently, is bring people on, see their value, see their potential value, and say, hey, I'm hiring you for this position, but in the future, I see you 5 years here, and let's not wait 5 years, but let's create this plan to get you to that position. So whether it's education or training that I can offer, or even mentorship, that's the best thing that I can offer people, as I run a company.
How do you motivate people that are just not motivated? I'm curious on that.
Gee, if I knew that answer, I'd write a book about it. Yeah, I don't know. I think you come alongside them, right? And I think prior to, you model, right? And so, I don't have to look far for my motivation. I'm married. I have bills. I have kids. So, like, man, what motivates me to get up and work? Like, I have responsibilities, but I think modeling is it, and just having conversations, and again, helping people develop a vision. And so people that aren't motivated, I think, don't have vision. And so someone that comes to work and they're dragging, like, this is a really good job that you have, you're making really good money. You're surrounded by great people. And if you're not motivated, I think it's because you don't have a vision. So I think modeling and really helping people, understand their vision for their life.
After reading your book, being that, I mean, the title alone is a stereotype. How do you inspire others, or how do you hope to inspire others, especially the younger generation that face stereotypes and take it personally?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that, winning's not normal, right? Is kind of a thought process. And so to think that you're just going to like show up because I can and achieve something, that's not normal. And so you're going to have to work for it. And so, you said it before too, is the book's not really about me. I share my story just in little bits of pieces. So people have given me feedback, oh, I want to hear more about you, but it's not about me. It's really about the reader. And so what I'm hoping is that they can see that winning's not normal and you can achieve whatever you want to achieve just by a little bit of work and consistency. And so I think that message should be at the forefront of our minds, is that winning's not normal, but it's possible. And so if they're willing to put in the work to establish a roadmap and then surround themselves by people that can encourage them along the way, the hard spots, that it's possible.
I love that. It's interesting because I have the perspective I'm always going to win, right? But the thing is, I failed so many times, but I just get up and I keep going. But I guess, when the failure hits, or you're in the middle of a struggle, right? You're not sure what the outcome's going to be, and it's not looking so good. I've never heard winning's not normal. And the thing is, in life, I don't want to be normal. I don't want, it's normal to not be able to control your emotions. Yeah. That's normal. Yeah. It's normal to react. Yeah. And I always train myself to not be normal because I want to be that person that can stay calm, cool, and collected, the person that can win and all that stuff. But all of that takes a lot of work. Yeah. And you have to have that vision, and that you mentioned in the book, and Nick Lavery said it on the show. You said the line, the cost of admission. Everything that you want to achieve has a cost of admission, and it all just boils down to how bad do you want it? How bad do you want to write that book? Writing a book's not easy, right? And nothing in life it's worth it is easy, and it's just seeing that vision and seeing it through and believing that it's possible, having the faith that you're going to achieve it despite the odds, despite the stereotypes, despite the negative self-talk. And I just think that was an amazing message. And now I want to know, what should we do on a daily basis to be able to develop that grit and that resilience that allows us to keep going and see that vision through?
Yeah. There's so many things, but I think the best thing I could give to listeners would be lead yourself, lead others, and then change the world. And it has to be in that order. If you try to change the world, but you're not leading yourself well, then people are going to look at you and look at you like an idiot because you haven't done anything and you're not carrying yourself well. If you try to lead others first, and you haven't led yourself, it's the same mindset. And so lead yourself, tackle that goal, discipline yourself, understand that failure is not final. Don't stay in your failures, and push past those failures. And then once you do that, you can lead, you're capable of leading others as well, and you have their respect. And then once you're able to lead others successfully, you will change the world. And so that's my mantra.
I love that. Thank you so much. And thanks for sharing. And thanks so much for being on the show. I really had a fantastic time talking to you. And I really want to recommend your book, Black People Can't Swim. Now, can you just let us know, too, where they can get it? Is it your website? Is it on Amazon, Barnes? Where can we get this
absolutely.
book?
Thank you, Gina, for the show. It was a pleasure. So great meeting you in person, number one. And I appreciate you having me on the show. It's been fantastic. The book's available on anywhere you can find a book. So Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and my website as well. The website's been thebentbow.com. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you again for being here. And for everyone that's listening, please like, share, comment, subscribe, become a Substack member to get access to special chapters that only our subscribers get. And it's completely free. So sign up for that. And I'll see you guys all next week. Thank you again.